All right, welcome to our study today, and we're going to be starting a series. First, going through the book of Genesis, but actually, we'll be focusing on the books of Torah. And if you're unfamiliar with what Torah is, it is the first 5 books of the Bible, so important to the Bible. It'll be Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And you'll find that all these books are connected, so we're going to be studying through them today. But actually, this is part of our series at the Whitmore Church of Christ. And Sunday evenings, we start at 5 o'clock p.m., but because we have not had the first videos recorded on that series, we're just going to do them from home, and then we'll pick up on chapter 6, which is recorded in the church building on Sundays, and then we'll go from there. And maybe sometimes we'll just do the at-home studies of the video, and maybe other times we'll post the actual lesson in the church. But we'll start off with Genesis chapter 1 here, and we'll just go through, and the goal is to understand these books. So verse 1 reads, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters." So the Spirit of God already makes an appearance in verse 2. And that's going to come important later on. Verse 3, "And God said, let there be light, and there was light, and God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness." So here we are introduced to an important theme in these books. The word separated is going to appear multiple times, and it's going to teach us a good lesson as we continue. But a good rule of Bible study that we're going to see here, if we want to understand what the Bible is saying, is that when you see a word repeated often, it's probably because the writer wants you to focus on that word. And so, likely, if you gave a letter to someone and you said, by the way, you left the trash out, and so with the trash in here, it's getting kind of messy, and so if the trash gets taken out, well, then it won't be so messy, and so next time, if you could come and take the trash out, then all the trash will be out. Well, what do you want the person to know? Well, that you want the trash out, right? And so the Bible is no different. God repeats things that he wants us to remember. And so that is the value of repetition. Well, here we see how often this word separated comes up. In verse 4, he separated the light from the darkness. Verse 5, God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. And God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening and there was morning the second day. And so, first, God separates the light from the darkness. Then, God separated the water that's actually on the earth. And yet, the dry land of the earth hasn't appeared yet. So, all you really see is water. And he separates that from the water that is in the sky, which we already know about. And so, the other thing we see, there was evening and there was morning. So this was not, some have made the point, could this have been eons of time? Because that word day has often referred to a length of time in the Bible. But that is an impossibility in Genesis chapter 1. Because he defines what he means by a day, an evening and a morning, one day, a 24-hour period. And so the Bible teaches that God had created all of the heavens, meaning the universe, and all of the earth, where we live, in 7 24-hour days. Some people try to challenge that, but again, as we go through with our series, what we see is that there is a ton of evidence that the Bible came from God. And so you have to see all of that evidence in order to really see how convincing that is, and the fact that we can know that this book came from God. But first, you have to know what the book is saying. And what the book is saying is that it only took a day. God spoke it and it happened. But the first thing we see separated is light from darkness, number one. And then number two, we see the waters were separated. And when we keep reading, we're going to see other things that were separated. So when we continue on there, verse 9, and God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. So now he separates dry land from the water. Well, verse 11, he separates more things. Verse 11, God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind on the earth." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, according to their own kind. So he's repeating that phrase too. And trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, there was morning, the third day. So why does he keep saying, according to its kind, according to its kind, according to its kind? He says, there's something I want you to know and remember about this. Where is the separation? The separation is in the fact that you just have plants and fruits, but you really don't have any rule about them. In other words, he hasn't said, all these different kinds of fruits and they could all grow on the same tree. But he separates them. He says an apple comes from an apple tree. An orange comes from an orange tree. And as far as what is more convincing based on what we see from nature, well, we've known that rule has always been the case. There has never been any crossing between the species of plants. There have been theories about that. There have been assumptions made that maybe one time they did, but there has been no evidence. Based on everything we have always known to be, the facts that we have been able to observe, we have always seen differences of species, and there has never been any sort of mutation. Based on what we've seen, that's the facts. And so what lines up with reality, so far, the Bible's view on it. But he separates the plants and the fruits according to their own kinds. And now we're going to see he does the same thing with the animals. But let's keep reading. Before he gets to that, he goes back to the light. Verse 14, and God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate," there's our word again, "to separate the day from the night. And let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made the two great lights. So this is in addition to. He already made the light. And now in addition to, God made the two great lights. The greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, number one. Number two, to rule the day, to rule over the day and over the night. And number three, to separate the light from the darkness. So 3 reasons there. God saw that it was good, and there was evening and there was morning the 4th day. So let's answer the question, how could there be light on earth if you have these stars that are so far away, and you have the moon, but it takes a certain amount of time for light to travel? And the answer is, everything we see here, God has made already mature. And we see that he had light on the earth before he created, number 1, the sun, number 2, the moon, and number 3, the stars. So he had already made it to where light was already present on the earth. And then in verse 16, he makes the 2 great lights. And then at the end of verse 16, he made the stars. So he put them in the heavens, and we would say nowadays the universe, so that light could continually be coming to the earth. But before that, he already made sure light was here. And this is not us trying to make an explanation to defend the Bible. This is the Bible defending itself, because That's what the text says. What does the text of the Bible say? And the text of the Bible says he made light on the earth, and then he made the sun, the moon, and the stars. And so the Bible, because it is the truth, is going to give us the proper explanation for how God created things in the universe. But that's important. But then we want to zoom in on the three things that God made the light for. Number one, he made it to give light on the earth. Number two, he made it to rule over the day and the night. And number three, he made it to separate the light from the darkness. Now, why is that important? Because what we're going to see is God only created one other thing to rule over something else. And so he only made the light, and we're going to see what he made else to rule over. And so the light ruling over the darkness is supposed to be, it turns into a conversation. He's talking about a natural thing, but it becomes good ruling over evil, and is what he intended. We're going to get to that. And so that becomes a major theme, a major lesson that God repeats in these first books of the Bible, Torah. But that's why he made the light, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But verse 20, and God said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let the birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kind. See, he's repeating it some more. And every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good, and God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening and there was morning the fifth day. And so now the creatures are made according to their kinds. We're looking at another separation. And that separation means now he says, the same thing I did with the plants, now the creatures in the waters, you're made according to your kind. There's a fish, there's a whale, there's a dolphin, there are seahorses. And so they're not going to cross. They're going to come from whatever their kind is. This is different than a species. And that's going to be important when we get to the flood. There might be thousands upon thousands of different species, but that doesn't mean all of those species are different kinds. You may have a cat, and you'll have lions, tigers, and some of those have been crossbred. But there's different species, but there's kinds. And so kinds is a little broader than a species. But the point is, you're not going to have a monkey that was from the kind of a cat. You're not going to have a dog that was from the kind of an alligator. And so evolution would dispute this, but the reality is that's a theory, and we've had to assume that things were different in the past, but based on everything we have observed, based on every law in nature, and as far as the actual evidence that we have zero evidence that there's been any species that mutated from a different kind. That has been assumed, but all we've ever seen is a kind came from its same kind. If it was a reptile, it came from that same kind of reptile. And that's what we've been able to observe as far as what are the facts. And so every mutation we've seen has been negative. We've never seen a mutation that led to to one kind of animal becoming a different kind of animal to where it could live in a healthy, sustainable way. And so these are theories, but unproven. And all the facts that we've actually been able to see and observe and write down lines up with how the Bible says things were created by God to be. And so we have to make a distinction, a separation between a theory, between an assumption, and between what are the facts, because they're not the same thing. If you make an assumption, or if you make an explanation about what could possibly make your theory work. You've made a possible explanation, but you have not proved it. Just because if someone questions your theory and you say, well, here's an explanation, you came up with a possible explanation, but you have not proved it. And so we have to look at the facts of what we have always been able to see and know. And so far, everything lines up with the Bible. But so he's done it with the sea creatures. In verses 24 through 25, you see again, according to its kind, according to its own kind. And so the same is true for the land animals. But then in verse 26, we see another separation, another distinction. And what God does here is he separates one creation, mankind, from all other things he created. And so he has separated man now. And in verse 26, he says, then God said, let us make man in our image, then after our likeness. And so you might say God made us according to his kind. Well, in verse 2, we saw that God was a spirit. He's not physical. He's a spirit. And so there's several ways we're made in the image of God. Well, number one, we're going to see as we go on and read the Bible, we also have a spirit. But secondly, when he makes them, he says in verse 28, God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And so God created children. We're going to see he created us to be his children. We'll see that in Genesis chapter 5. And now we can multiply and have children just like he created them. He gave us that ability. And then he says in verse 28, subdue it, have dominion over it. And so he created us to rule over creation or govern it, manage it. And so we are in God's image also because he's the ruler and he gave us the ability to rule over and manage things. And so there's several ways we're made in God's image, but especially we see that first one. We know God is a spirit already, and we have that physical side to us. We also have a spiritual side to us as well. And so verse 27, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So this includes man and woman. When he talks about man, he's talking about male and female. And so we are made in his image there, male and female, and we are different than any other created thing. And we also see a plural form, our image, let us. And so while the Bible has always claimed God to be one God, we see early on here that there is more than one person. And as we continue studying, we'll get more into the Trinity and how that's possible. But for now, all we need to know is that the Bible claimed there is one God, one creator, but there is more than one person, as difficult as it is to understand. And so God created man to rule over. He only created light to rule over and man to rule over. And so we would say it this way, the same way that light is to rule over darkness, we were created to rule over as well. And eventually that theme is going to become, we're supposed to rule over sin. We're supposed to rule over desire. And then the problem with man, of course, is he's not able to. He instead lets sin rule over him. But God created good to rule over evil. So that kind of sets the stage. And we'll get to some more things on that in the next video. But for now, this is a good stopping point. So we'll continue on with what happens next when we get to the next video. Thank you.